Welcome to Objections with Stan Willis. I'm Michael Morris with Stan. Stan, how are you?
You introduced me twice.
No. Technically, I introduced the name of the show, then I introduced you.
Oh, I'm in the name of the show?
Yeah,
I didn't realize. Am I in the name of the show, Nate?
Here's the thing, because if the show becomes huge.
If it becomes huge.
And then
when it becomes huge.
When it becomes huge from what we're talking about, you might leave this show to do another show. So then it would be like Objections with Nathan Schroner, and we would sit here and he would go, I don't know anything about the law. And I'd say, we only got to fill another 29 minutes. Fair?
Fair enough.
Okay. So
move on. I'm good today. How are you, Mike?
I'm fantastic, and I can't wait because we are doing this show today, and it's a hot button issue, and I always like to get your hot takes.
My hot takes.
But it has to do with employment law.
Okay.
And everybody knows how sexy that is.
I have employees.
Yes, but I want to get into this part. If let's say you're Google or Facebook, you're Mark Zuckerberg.
Right.
They are saying Google.
I didn't wear my hoodie today.
If you had a hoodie, this would be so much better a show. You're like too dressed up to be like a tech guru guy.
I'm sorry.
You look like a lawyer.
I'm kind of got my Tiger Woods Sunday thing on today.
You going to the Waffle House? That's where he met all his women.
Really?
Well, at least one of them.
Okay.
I'll show you all the Google pictures. So speaking of Google and Facebook, they are making it mandatory. If you're going to go back to work there, I don't know if we can say, let's just call it the jab.
Yeah, the jab.
If you don't get that, you cannot come back to work.
Right.
My question for you, dealing with employment law, is that first of all, is that legal? And second of all, how can they enforce that?
Well, sounds like there are two questions there.
Yeah, but again, we got to fill 30 minutes.
On the first instance, I think that it would be illegal I think it is illegal for governments to require it. So a government, I don't think that a government can require its employees to have the vaccination. I think that might be a violation of maybe at least one of the amendments. But for private employers, I think that private employers probably are okay to require the jab if that's what they want to do. From a constitutional standpoint, I think that's probably okay. There may be, in some states, there may be some state issues with that, but from a federal standpoint, I think that they're probably okay to require it. But the problem becomes if I require you to have a vaccination and you have an adverse reaction for that vaccination, at least in Ohio under workers' compensation, the employer buys that. So whatever adverse reaction you have and whatever treatment there is, whatever ongoing problems you might have, if the employer requires the vaccination, I think the employer is on the hook for that. The same way that the employer is on the hook if you're a salesperson and they send you to Toledo and you get in an accident.
Right.
But
see, those things aren't being fished out because, again, if I signed, when I worked in radio, you had to sign employment contracts. They just protected the station from you leaving or things that you might do.
Right.
Nowhere in there did it have anything to do with my health, right? So I look at Google and Facebook, that's mandatory.
Right.
And then you look at something like the NFL, where the NFL is saying they want you to get it. They can't. Right now, they're not saying they're going to make you do it.
Right.
So Dak Prescott, in his first press conference, says they asked him if he was going to get it, and he said, "I think that's a HIPAA violation. You can't even ask me."
Right. And so HIPAA is the other wild card in all of this, and there are legal opinions on both sides right now. So you have people who have written legal opinions that say, "Yeah, this is definitely a violation of HIPAA," and then you have other people who have written legal opinions that say HIPAA doesn't apply here. As far as I know, as I sit here, there has not been a court ruling on that. So what it will eventually mean, lawyers can have opinions all day, but until there's a court ruling that actually goes through the appeals process, you don't really have settled law on any of that. So it's going to be interesting as these things all shake out. And the other thing that everybody fears, what everybody's afraid of, is that they're going to have this. They're going to have an ID. They're going to. I mean, right. I think now they actually do issue a card.
I can't remember what it's called. I know it's called a vaccination card, but there's a name for it. Right. Because in New York, they're talking about requiring it to get on subways, requiring it to go certain places. My thing as an individual is that I'm looking at it and saying, they're almost kind of forcing you to do this, right. And then whatever the repercussions are, deal with it. Right. But I also look at it like Zantac was approved by the FDA. This product gets out there, and then they say, "Oh, this thing will eat you from the inside," right. And you've been taking it for 20 years. Right. We don't know what's going to happen down the line, but if you're forced to do it for your employment, that's the part where I think this gets shady.
Right, and the bigger issue in all this, like with Zantac, the drug companies that made it were on the hook.
Right.
The problem with the jab is that the drug companies have immunity. They've been right. granted immunity. So essentially where you are, if your employer is forcing you to take this, that's the only recourse available. If you voluntarily take it and you have all kinds of problems, you've got no recourse because the drug companies have no liability. So, it's going to be interesting to watch this all play out as it goes. I did want to mention the other thing that I haven't really heard anybody talking about too much, but vaccine requirements have been around for a long, long time for people who travel overseas. So
that is true.
So if you want to go to certain parts of South America, certain parts of East Asia, or certain parts of Africa, you have to get a malaria vaccine. You have to get all these other vaccines that we don't traditionally get here, and they're required if you want to go and come back. So there is precedent out there for vaccine requirements.
But to go to other countries and then come back, right. It's the guy that lives in Dayton and he drives 10 minutes back and forth to work, and you're going to say, if you don't get this, you don't have a job.
Right.
To me, I think that...
Well, that's a different level. That's a different level thing, and it involves your employment, so it involves a whole different set of laws, or an additional set of laws. And so, that's why I said this is it's a pretty complex issue, and it's going to be interesting to watch it all play out.
Isn't this kind of like shooting a bullet into the wall and going, "Put your hands up, don't move"? After, I mean, you're not giving somebody the information we're getting over the last 18 months changes.
Right.
Masks work, they don't work. Take the mask off, they never work. Now mask back up. If you're not going to if there's no standard level, I could understand the hesitancy. I think South Carolina, like 30% of the population, adamantly just refuses. They won't do it.
Right.
So, but if you look at the map of the new variant strain, California is completely in the red. California, the surrounding southern states, Florida has it. But at some point, those people are going to travel, right? Someone's going to go down on spring break to Florida and come back, or go to California to see bums in the street and just for fun and then come back. Right. You don't know if you're carrying it anyway.
Right.
But in Ohio, if you look at this map of the severity, like right now, Columbus by itself isn't even of any concern, and yet they're still telling you that you have to do this. And if I'm an employee, I'm starting to question why I have to do this, because you're my employer. You provide me health insurance as part of my job, but you can't say, hey, you should probably go get a cancer screening, or you should do this and this. Right. You're making me do this so that I can come to work. At what point does that violate my what do they call it? Right to work state? Well, I'm probably saying that wrong.
Well, Ohio is technically a right to work state, but it's not. Employers can put reasonable, I guess that's the word that's going to be litigated, is whether it's reasonable. But employers are allowed to put reasonable restrictions on people coming. They can require certain things already. They can require that, for instance, that you have a valid driver's license. They can require that you, even though they can't discriminate against you for an injury, they can require that you are physically capable of doing the job for which you've applied. So, for instance, if you've had back surgery and you can't lift more than 15 pounds and your job requires that the job that you've applied for requires that you lift 50 pounds.
Right.
They can deny you based on that. It's not like they can make a reasonable accommodation if the packages that come in are 50-pound packages. So,
Right.
So employers are allowed to put restrictions like that on people. And right now, I don't think that, at least from a federal standpoint, there's anything that would stop them from requiring that vaccine, like I said. But I do think that the employers that require it are buying any injury that comes from that. And we don't know. So the scariest thing about all this is the research on this is changing daily.
Right.
And we don't know what the long-term effects are from having the disease or from having the
injections.
jab. And then you have all these weird reports, like there was a report out of the UK a week or two ago that 60% of their new cases are
People who
are fully vaccinated.
Right.
And, and all this information that's out there on the internet, I mean, there's just a ton of information. It's hard to tell what's truth and what's not truth. It's hard to tell what's, even from the agencies like the CDC and the UK Department of Health, it's hard to tell what's verified and what's not verified because it changes and they seem to contradict themselves. And then, like Candace Owens made a good point the other day. She said, how all of the tests only test positive or negative. So how do they know it's the Delta variant?
Right. Well, there's a new study. There was a new report out that that the test that they're using to go along with that is that they have to add something else to this because some of these are coming up as false positives to begin with. Mm-hmm. I just always go back and I was on my conversations with my daughter who's 14 years old. What I said to her is, this is a math equation. If you don't know how to
shout out to Amelia, by the way.
Yeah, shout out to her and shout out for giving me this pencil. If you don't know where it came from, I don't care where it came from. I don't care about the origin, but you can't tell me that this fixes this if I don't know where it came from.
Right.
So if the goalpost keeps getting moved, I don't know that we have a solution to fix this problem. And I think it's something we're going to live with the rest of our lives because no matter what happens, the people are still going to carry this. Like they carry the flu, like they carry other viruses. You might have the flu right now and you have no symptoms and I don't even know.
Right.
Where I get kind of crossed up on this is I'm thinking as somebody that I don't have employees, but if I did, I'm a private sole proprietor hiring other people. I can't require them to do anything. Even if I believe in it, I can't require you to do anything. When I submit for employment and I sign a contract, I'm really under their thumb.
Right.
So what I've seen is some of the media companies are saying you guys will all work from home from now because they know they can't force their people to do it.
Right.
Because it's not in that contract. What I find funny are the factories, the Amazons and Walmarts. They're not requiring them to do that.
Right.
Because can't. It's a supply chain. Right. They can if you're a person who codes or you're a person that's in charge of meta tags and all this other stuff. They control that because they'll just find another person. Right. When you're talking about somebody moving a 50-pound box for 8 hours a day, they don't care. I don't want to say this in a mean way, but you're just a mule. You're just moving stuff around. Your health didn't matter to me anyway. That's why your health coverage isn't very good when you do those jobs. So you're trading your time for that dime. If you get sick, just don't miss a week because your job's on the line. Right. And we live in a time when you can't get people to work anyway. So if you're trying to hire someone, good luck.
Well, and so I think that you make a valid point, and I think that ultimately a lot of this stuff will shake out, because what will happen is, if you're say you're a restaurant chain, say you're I don't know Cameron Mitchell Restaurants or whatever, and you decide we're going to require all of our people have the vaccine, you can't even get enough people to work anyway.
Right.
So if that requirement is something that's impeding staffing restaurants, then eventually you're just going to say, you know what? We don't really care that much.
Right. It's the service industry.
Just come and work for us. And so your point is valid as long as there is an ample supply of employees for the job that they're hiring for, they will require it all day long. But like if you're the if you're the 76ers and LeBron James wants to come to work for you and you say, have you had the jab? And he says no, you're going to say, well, okay, don't worry.
Well, that was a thing when he was hurt. He had hurt his ankle, and Dennis Schroeder was also hurt at the same time, and he was getting ready to come back. And as he's talking to the reporters, he goes, what's funny is I think LeBron and I are the only ones that didn't get vaccinated.
I didn't know he didn't. I was just saying that.
Well, he never made a comment because they won't ask him that, because let's say he doesn't. He becomes the hero for the people that don't want it.
Right.
But he's not saying that he's getting it. I don't see big name athletes saying it.
And this is just my perspective. I have personally stopped watching most sports because of the political nature of
political tie-ins.
I was trying to say politicization. Politicization a word?
Nate, leave all of this in here. Leave all of us trying to say...
Is politicization a word, Nate? Okay.
Nate technically gave us a thumbs up. When he does this, that's a good.
I just invented a word.
It should be politicization with Stan Willis.
And if you could say that, we love you.
I just want to put that on a shirt because there's a bunch of I's and O's that are in there that probably shouldn't be in there. And it would just be Nate on the shirt like this.
Anyway, what I was saying, I think athletes need to be able to have an opinion. And they have, because everybody has a right to an opinion. Everybody has a right to use, and everybody has a right to use their stage for, pushing whatever their opinion is. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But when I tune in to watch a football game or a basketball game or a baseball game, I don't want to. I want to just enjoy the.
It's escapism.
Yeah,
you're putting everything I'm trying to run away from in front of me for another 2.5 hours.
Right, because as soon as you start doing that, and I don't care what the cause is, I don't care. As soon as they start doing that, then for me, it totally destroys the reason why I'm doing that anyway. So I can't. I don't watch it. I don't tune in, and I don't think I'm alone, because the numbers watching, especially professional sports, are dropping like crazy, and I think it's because most people are saying, I deal with this all freaking day, every day. Can't I have 2 hours of just watching big guys bang into each other?
Yeah, and you can see a lot of that if you Google that. Just don't Google that phrase. I agree with you, but I think that it's also creating a division between two sides. So athletes are really brands, right? So what people don't understand is when you watch a movie, that movie is a business. That movie, if you look it up, is an LLC. Right. So it can lose money, it can make money, however that. Big time athletes are also the same. Like Bryce Harper is an LLC. He's not a person. So when you speak on a certain topic, you're really speaking for your brand. Right. And if that brand is tied to a political viewpoint for clicks or purchases, it's completely different. And I think what we're seeing now is you have two things. They don't want to talk about the vaccine and right to work and all that other stuff because it doesn't apply to them. Right. They're getting free choice. So when a politician speaks up and says you should do this, I want to know how much Big Pharma is contributing to your campaign. That's what I want to know, right? Mm-hmm. So number one, you're speaking for people that are putting money in your pocket. It's the same with the gun lobbyists where they're like, I think we should put guns in the hands of 5-year-olds. I'm completely fine with it as long as you teach them what to do with it. But don't tell me that while the NRA is paying you. And I feel like the same thing is happening with big drug companies.
It's absolutely the same thing happening.
But it goes back to sports. Why aren't people watching? Because we are constantly being preached to in this country about how we are terrible people if we don't go along with whatever. Sometimes people just don't. There's people that don't like cookies, right? But if you told me I got to eat cookies every single day and I don't want to do it, what's wrong with you? You're anti this and this and this. Sometimes it's my choice, right? You only get so much time on this earth. I don't want to spend time listening to your opinion over and over. And I think you're looking at people and they're saying the same people that are Republicans are not getting it. That's not the case. I know plenty of people that are Republicans that get this. I know people on the left that aren't getting this. I just didn't understand how this became such a division of, again, it's almost like Germany in the 30s, and it wasn't all that hip to choose sides. If everybody has to be on one side, I always think that we're wrong.
Right.
And that's the same thing with employers. If an employer controls your life when you leave, which is what medications or what are you doing, you don't have an employer, you have an enslaver. Right. And it's not a fair thing. I mean, the way that you run your office is completely different because you have so many different personalities in here and you just let them be. If everybody went in a linear line and that's all they did, you don't have people that are making you better. You have extensions of you.
Right.
And you're not doing the day-to-day like they are. Right. Mm-hmm. If they're an extension of you and they're like, well, you know what? I don't care about that either.
Did you see the cartoon I shared the other day on LinkedIn? It had the guy sitting across from the boss. The boss is talking, and he says, what we're looking for here is people who have creative ways of doing what I want them to do.
Right. Well, that's the other thing is that I look at in the last, say, 18 months, 24 months, you're seeing that our media is being picked apart. And if you don't like it, if you don't like male parts being changed into female parts with no explanation or, you're supposed to accept it. I do believe, listen, I hate the media. That's why we're doing a show that is media. But what I don't like about it is it's constantly sending you this message, right? If you don't go along with this and you don't go along with this, now you're becoming a target. Because there was a journalist the other day that said they should go after anybody who voted for Trump.
Yeah, that's been around for a minute.
But it continues.
Trumpers and
right. So all you're doing is you're singling out one party. If you fight back against it, oh, you must be a bigot or you must be this and this. Right. That's not the case. Sometimes people just want free speech.
Well, and then it's asking you to prove a negative, right? So it's where it's the old, the first sign that you're an alcoholic is that you deny that you're an alcoholic. Well, right. So if somebody says you're an alcoholic and you say no, then obviously you're an alcoholic. It's the same thing. I mean, it is exactly the same argument. They're just, are you a terrorist? No, obviously you're a terrorist.
Obviously you're hiding something.
Yeah.
I've stopped watching the news altogether because I think you've probably seen Sinclair Broadcasting. This brought to you by Sinclair Broadcasting, by the way. They have a mandate that's like a 2-minute segment. So every market, this person reads this thing as though it's a news story.
Really?
And they piece it together, and there's over 80 different stations that said the exact same thing because it's written. They're reading off the teleprompter.
I think I saw this on.
But it's fascinating if you think about it because people are watching the news. Like I have a really good friend that she and her husband are, let's just say they love to watch Rachel Maddow and, well, I don't know why, but every night. So she will repeat talking points that she heard on that. So say Trump tax returns. She texts me, they got him. And it was one page from 2017 and all that. And it's like, I could probably get a copy of your tax return with just one page and go, I got stand dead to rights. The whole point is it becomes Geraldo when he found Al Capone's vault. Right. And at the end, there's a bottle cap and a couple of papers in there. And people watch that for 90 minutes thinking something big was there. Whenever the media is on one side, I'm always going the opposite direction because they're always taking the side of big corporations. And that's where I get frustrated. It's like when you repeat what you saw on television, you didn't do any critical thinking. You politicized it.
political.
You know what's funny is as soon as we're done with this, we're going to come up with that word and go, oh, that's what it was.
Politicization.
I think you're adding another T in there. There's not No, stop that. No, we're not going to get it. We're just not going to get it.
Can you spell that for us? Come on, Nate, spell that for me. Somebody look it up.
Yes. I wouldn't be like Joe Rogan, like Jamie, Google that. So since we're running out of time on this episode, your last thoughts on this. If you're an employee and your employer says you can't come to work unless you take the jab, what would be your advice? Not their lawyer, but just in law in general. How would you phrase it to them that what rights do they have?
Well, if that happens and you don't want to do it, then what I would do is try to find a lawyer, an employment lawyer, to consult about that and maybe have them engage in negotiations on your behalf. You might be able to get your employer to back down, especially if they're a small employer. If it's a large employer and you have the ability, I'd say just find another job where they don't require it if you don't want to take it. If you don't mind taking the jab, knock yourself out, man. Take the jab and move on. Ultimately, it's all going to shake out. The problem now is it's all new. So, do I think that it's a winnable situation to say, yeah, you can't require me to do that? Yeah, I think it's winnable. It's also losable.
Right.
And at the end of the day, being the test case is expensive. So,
and if you lose, you have no option.
Right.
Because now you can be, hey, now you know what you got to do.
Right.
That's why I think no one's bringing those cases forward, because if somebody loses that case, it's going to see, the government agreed, this is what you should do. And it was even put through the court system.
Right. Well, could be that, or it could be that it's just new enough that no one's come forward. Sooner or later, somebody will. Sooner or later, it'll get litigated. And once it gets litigated, then everybody will know what to do. It's new now. And everything that's new is like this.
Right.
From a moral standpoint, you got to decide where you fall. My thought has always been if you're worried about it and you want to get the injections, why does what everybody else does affect you? It doesn't really affect you. Except then in the case where then the injections don't work, and if the injections don't work, then why are we requiring them in the first place? So I guess if you're going to require injections, you have to be falling in the camp that they work. If they do work, why are we requiring them? So that's kind of where I am on the thing, is that I think this should be a personal choice. I think that if people are worried about it and they want to get the injections and they're informed, they should be able to do that. And if other people are aware and informed and understand the risks and don't want to do it, I think they should be free to do that.
The only person that I would listen to is Kurt Cobain, because that guy knew about injections and what worked and what's too much.
Indeed.
You've been listening to Objections with Stan Willis, and we'll see you next week.